Right, hi everybody, it's Bill Essler from Woodworking Network, coming to you from the AWF Fair at the Las Vegas Convention Center. I'm here at the Access Technologies booth, and we're going to talk today about Akoya. Now, you may have heard of Akoya. It arose on the market a few years back, but it has just started to really gain traction in the US, hence our presence here at AWFS. I have two people very knowledgeable on woodworking with me, and Mike Lewis in particular with Access Technologies. He's the resident expert on use of Akoya wood, and he has experience as a millworker. Access Technologies is European based, so you'll detect some accents here. And then also with me is Jared Patchen. You can tell I'm a bit hoarse after a couple days here at AWFS shouting over the noise. So Jared is going to help me with some of the questions because his voice isn't worn out yet. So to get us started, Mike, why don't you tell us about Access Technologies?
We are a chemical engineering company, and the core focus of our business is the acetylation of wood. Acetylation is a process that changes wood, and we modify wood and we turn wood into something quite different from its original substrate, and we call that product Akoya.
Okay, and could you explain the process? What is it called, and how does it do its magic?
Akoya, as I just said, it's a modified wood. It is a wood that has been altered. It has been changed at its molecular level. And following this change, we take away the wood's hygroscopic properties. We make wood so it no longer wants to bond with water. We make it so it doesn't want to absorb water. Therefore, it becomes the most stable wood that there is. We also take away from the wood, or change within the wood, the food source for anything that wants to eat it. So Akoya can no longer provide any nutritional value or food source for wood-destroying organisms. So ants and insects, fungi, rots and so on, because they can no longer find any food value from Akoya, they go along and eat a piece of sapele. So Akoya, it's a wood that's been modified, and it becomes the most stable and rot-resistant wood that there is.
Okay, and so where is Akoya transformed? Who does this process and where?
We do this process at Access Technologies. We are a UK company. Our head office is just outside London in Windsor. Our manufacturing plant is in Arnhem in the Netherlands. The wood is originally sourced from New Zealand. We transport it to Holland, the Netherlands, and then we disseminate it as Akoya all around the world.
Okay. So this is going to be a lot of fun today because we can ask you all kinds of questions, and it's a new platform that we're trying where you can submit questions to Twitter, questions to our unique platform, and then we're also joined by a live audience here at the show, so we'll take some questions from real human beings that are here to learn more about Akoya wood as well. Now, what kind of uses does Akoya get?
Because of the stability and the rot resistance of the wood, we find that Akoya gets used by manufacturers of all sorts of wooden products whereby those attributes are a benefit, which is pretty much everywhere. So we're talking about windows and doors, decking, siding, big glue lamp structures, underground water management systems, and so on and so forth, because it enables manufacturers to design and engineer out potential maintenance issues associated with traditional wood. So the end uses are almost limitless.
Okay. Now, in the United States, we see treated wood, and it has sort of a bad name because a lot of times they use formaldehyde in it. Are there any chemicals like that within the Akoya?
Well, firstly, the modification of Akoya is quite unlike a biocidal or fungicidal method of prolonging the life of wood. We are modifying the wood, and it is a chemical process, and the chemical that we use is vinegar, everyday acetic acid. So we're using something already within the wood to induce this molecular reaction in the wood, and then we take it all out again. So we haven't introduced anything new into the wood that wasn't already there to begin with.
Okay, so it's a bit like pickling, only drier.
As scientists argue, it's a little bit more complex, but you're on the right wavelength.
Okay. Are there questions here in the audience? Does anyone have an immediate question? This young lady.
Yes, young, thank you. I'm thinking about changing my windows out of my house, and if I asked for Akoya in my windows, what would be the advantage?
Well, you have several advantages. Firstly,
Well, for the benefit of our audience online, we're going to ask Jared to repeat the question.
So the question was from the audience, if you as a consumer want to use, what are the benefits to using Akoya for windows or doors or other home building products?
many advantages to be gained by that. Firstly, because of the stability of the wood, you will not have to redecorate your windows as frequently as if you had traditional wood. Let me explain a little bit further. In this booklet that we have here, which you will be able to see below the video, on page 13, if you go to slide 13, we can see here a test that was carried out in the Netherlands. And on this test, the Wood Institute, they got some traditional wood here, and they got some Akoya wood. And they painted these panels with a typical external paint, and they threw them onto a test rig and just left them there for 10 years. They forgot about them. And then after 10 years, they brought these panels inside, and we can see that there's a difference in the coatings behaviour of the two panels. The traditional wood, it's getting bigger and smaller, which is stretching the coating and putting it under distress. The grain structure, the early wood, the late wood of the wood, that's all going up and down all of the time, causing further disruption of the coating. Yet with the Akoya, I've explained that it doesn't grow that way, but also it stays completely flat. The grain doesn't lift. The early wood, the late wood, it stays flat. Fibres are not moving around, so it provides an ideal substrate to prolong the life of paint. So as a homeowner, you would not have to decorate your windows or doors for significantly longer. A further benefit that you would have, Akoya is a lot more thermally insulative than traditional woods. It enables a window to have a lower U value than softwood and a much lower U value than hardwood. That means that during the winter months it will be easier to insulate your home. You will not have to put the heating up so much. A further advantage, being a homeowner, you can be comforted that your door will work in all seasons. In the winter it will not swell and you won't be able to open it, and in the summer it won't shrink. So by being a homeowner, you can be comforted by having a product, a window or door, that will not only perform well, but it will remain looking pristine for many years to come.
Okay, very interesting.
And Mike, we got a question online from Bob Winters. He says, how long can Akoya be exposed to water and still remain in its original condition?
Akoya is guaranteed a ground level for 25 years against the first sign of rot. Above ground, it's guaranteed for 50 years against the first sign of rot. And in both of those guarantees, no further coatings or treatments or preservatives are required.
So below ground would be posts sunk in the ground for a porch or something like that?
Posts sunk in the ground, that would be 25 years. And to support that, we have test evidence from all around the world. And again, let me refer you to this booklet. So again, looking just below the video, you'll see this booklet, and we have several tests going on around the world to endorse or validate what I've just said about the guarantee. For example, this is a test going on at Scion Institute in New Zealand. They are a wood institute, and in this test, in this graveyard or stake test, Akoya is outperforming Burmese teak in its rot resistance. Now, Burmese teak is a very durable wood, but according to this institute, which is a third-party institute, they say Akoya is working so much better.
Okay. Now, if a wood is that durable, does it mean it's also very hard? Is it hard to work with?
I'm a past mill worker. I used to make windows and doors, and I machined wood. Akoya is a dream to work with. It's like machining butter with a hot knife. It is so much easier than dense tropical hardwoods.
Okay. How about its durometer or the janky hardness? Do we have to worry about the blades? Do you need a tougher blade?
No, we don't. We do increase the yanker hardness of the wood. It is slightly harder than a traditional pine, but not as hard as hardwood. So it's not aggressive on tooling at all.
Now, we're used to certain colors that we associate with species. With the Akoya process, a familiar species might change color, or how does it affect the color of the original species?
When we process the wood, we cause a stain to appear on the perimeter of the board. So if you buy a lump of Akoya, it has this brown stain on the surface. Now that brown stain may penetrate to a depth of 1/4 of an inch at most, but by taking off 1/4 of an inch, we end up with blonde looking pine. So the colour is not altered.
Okay, so that sounds pretty stable. Now, if you've just joined us, I'm Bill Essler at Woodworking Network at the AWF Fair with Mike Lewis, our expert from Axis Systems, talking about Akoya wood, the unique treated wood. And with me, you can hear I'm hoarse, is Jared Patchen of J. Alexander Fine Woodworking in Boise, and he's fielding some questions brought to us online. So Jared, I see some are popping up there.
Yeah, James Seisel from Eastport, Maine asks, how long does well, you already kind of answered this, how long does the wood last in a normal setting? And then, does the acetylation process add overall weight to the wood? Does it go from a lightweight piece of pine to a heavy, harder piece of pine?
No, we don't alter the weight of the wood, although, as I said earlier, we slightly increase its yanker hardness.
Let's see, another one from Janine Lacroix. Hope I got that right. Does the price of Akoya compare favorably to other untreated woods of similar quality? I suppose the only other untreated woods out there would be teak, ipe, that kind of thing.
To buy raw lumber, Akoya, the price would be similar to that of genuine mahogany. Yet to manufacture a window or door from Akoya would be about the same cost as manufacturing it from sapele.
Another question here, where is it available? If you guys are unveiling it here at the show, are you still getting distribution channels here in the US figured out?
We've got a distribution network that covers the whole of the US, so it's available wherever you live in the US.
Well, maybe from that, Mike, how long has Akoya been around? Because we haven't really talked about that.
No, we haven't. No, Akoya's a reasonably new product. It's been around for 8 years.
Okay, so that's enough time for people to have heard about it. Are there some cases of applications in the U.S. that you've seen or have heard about that you can tell us about?
Yes, I have. There's been a number. I've recently travelled around Illinois and Wisconsin, and we have some very fine projects there. We have some curved staircases, which are external, going down to swimming pools. We have decking projects. And the use of Akoya in the US, it is growing. It is growing quite exponentially, quite quickly.
Okay, that's very good. Anybody, if you have a question here in the audience, just wave and, okay.
Got one. You mentioned Akoya in a decking application. How would it compare with some of the tropical hardwoods that we normally use?
Yeah, so the question from the audience is, how does Akoya compare in a decking application to the current offerings? Ipe or teak or...
It would be comparable in cost. To manufacture though from Akoya, it is easier to work with, and there will be process savings because it's easier to machine, there'll be less sanding, but the big benefit would be, even over Ipe and other tropical hardwoods, when it's down in a decking situation, it's not going to distort, and there's not going to be the occasional boards that degrade and go rotten. But I saw a wonderful decking project. It was in Norway, and it was a deck that had been down for maybe 2.5 years. And the boards were very, very wide. They were maybe a foot wide. And it was for a cafe, for an outside area. And after 2 years, this deck looked as pristine as the day it was put down. There's a slight silvering and weathering on the surface, but where the boards are being mitered together, we understand the difficulty of mitering wide boards together, the joint was as tight as the day it was first done. There had been no warping or distorting of the boards. It looked superb. So from a cost point of view, it's comparable with a tropical hardwood. From a cosmetic point of view, it remains looking better.
Okay. So you mentioned 12 inches wide. Does it come in 4/4, 5/4 type lumber that woodworkers like me would be used to, or is it dimensional lumber like 2x, 4x?
It's dimension stock, so that enables process savings in production. For example, if you wanted to make a door, we could buy 5 by 2.5 inch material, and all we have to do is cross-cut the door style, put it through a moulder, job done. Unlike with a tropical hardwood, the first exercise would be to slice the boards up. So we eliminate that process, and of course we're therefore also saving on waste. Further process savings would be when the wood machines, as I explained earlier, there'll be a lot less sanding to be done, if any, so there's a process saving there. But another big benefit of working with Accoya is that when it comes to coating and you put a base coat onto Accoya, the grain doesn't lift, the fibres don't lift, which is what happens with traditional timber, so therefore it doesn't need to be sanded between layers of paint. Another process saving.
Now, a couple of the writers for Woodworking Network, who are woodworkers, have written stories of some of the projects they did. One was the state capitol building of Minnesota, and Brooks Gentleman, who runs a window restoration firm, recommended Accoya, and it was used on that entire project. And I also had another woodworker in Birmingham who did a church restoration and rebuilt the windows in Accoya. Is it natural for windows, and are there unique properties about it that lend themselves to windows in particular?
Stability is when making windows or doors, stability is a problem associated with traditional wood. Now, I used to make windows and doors and they didn't always behave themselves. Through no fault of my own, windows would swell, they would stick, doors would swell and stick. For restoration projects, the reason that restoration projects are what they are is because the wood needs to be replaced. But with Accoya, it's not going to go rotten and it will behave in that situation in the future. But it's also very good for repairing wood that has gone rotten. And I've seen many projects, a couple of them being in the UK, whereby in a restoration environment, the rotten wood has been cut away, new wood has been put in, or Accoya wood has been put in place as a splice, and then when it's painted over, it works well.
Okay, and in an application like that, it meets the criteria for formal restoration projects. How about lead points? Do we see Accoya used in lead projects?
Yes, because it's a timber, it's a very environmentally friendly timber. It is radiata pine, which is sourced from plantation and replenished forestry from New Zealand. We then cut the tree, modify the wood, turn the wood into something that doesn't degrade and go rotten, so therefore we're locking greenhouse gases or carbon into this finished product. And for the simplicity of locking carbon into Accoya, it wins awards all around the world, in some country, all of the time, for its environmental credentials. For example, Accoya has a gold certificate for cradle to cradle, so therefore that gives it extra credits for LEED.
I see. Okay. Now we do have a break here. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question? Anyone else?
I have a question. You've been successful in assimilating any other species. So you add other species.
So the question for the people via the internet is, have you guys had success doing any other species besides pine, radiata pine?
Yes, we have. We're doing a very large prototype project at the moment using beech, which, as you know, is not an exterior timber, and we think it's going to have a very fine application for decking. It's harder than regular radiata Accoya. In the past, we have also acetylated successfully red alder, as you know, a North American hardwood and also European hardwood. Historically, we've also looked at southern yellow pine and some other species. Essentially, we're looking at timbers that are porous and open grain because they take our process well.
Any other questions? Okay.
Well, you mentioned earlier the decking, 12-inch wide boards, mitered. They started to gray. Does it weather just like a cedar fence over time if you don't seal it, or do you have to seal it, or especially since it's so water resistant, would you even bother?
The weathering of wood is not an exact science. Depending on its orientation to the sun and its location, regular wood may take on a lovely silver colour. If it's on the leeward side or shaded from the sun, it may go black and mouldy. Accoya is the same. But if it does silver out, unlike traditional timber, it is very superficial to the surface. It doesn't start degrading below the weathered surface, so it won't degrade further.
And now we have a kind of interesting display here. What is this telling us about Accoya wood?
What we have in this fish tank with all of the bubbles, here we have regular wood. In this example it's pine, and here we have Accoya. We're trying to illustrate the fact that the pine has swollen, and we can see it here just above the waterline. With Accoya, it hasn't swollen, it's remained stable. We're trying to show the stability of the timber.
Okay, so can our camera get a close up so we can see the difference in the height there? Good. Very
And
good.
if we look closely at these two panels, with the regular timber, we may be able to see that the grain is lifting. The early wood and the late wood, the differential movement is causing it to be slightly rough. And if we could see along the board, we may see that it's distorted in its length as well. With Accoya, if we were to take this board out, we could see that it's completely flat. The grain hasn't lifted, the fibres haven't lifted, and it will still be completely straight.
Very good. One area that's become popular in the United States, maybe it's global warming, is the outdoor kitchen. And have you run across applications of Accoya wood for cabinets for outdoor?
Yes, I have. I've got a couple of applications in Europe where, again, because of the stability of the wood and the fact that it doesn't degrade, it's ideal for not only outdoor kitchens but also outdoor garden furniture, pagodas or anything else in the garden.
Okay. All right.
Well, a question I had, we talked about the process you guys do, you deal with dimensional lumber. Do you also do sheet goods? So if a cabinet maker, speaking of the outdoor kitchen, wanted to cut a cabinet box up out of plywood, put it all together, solid wood doors, is that possible, or is he gluing up solid wood to make the cabinet box?
We can glue the timber, and it glues very well, so we can make very wide boards by gluing it, by laminating it together. We also have a board product which we call Medite Tricoya, we call Tricoya, and it is an MDF product that's being made from Accoya. So it has all the attributes of Accoya. It doesn't take in moisture, it therefore doesn't expand, it doesn't swell, it doesn't delaminate, it doesn't degrade. And it's available as a sheet material, as an 8x4 sheet. That's a board, that's a sheet product that we do have. It's also available to cross-laminate Accoya, and we can also provide or have manufactured sheet material that may be 1 inch thick by 10 by 5, 3-ply cross-laminated.
Okay. We talked a bit about sourcing earlier and availability in the U.S. market. For woodworkers who are just finding out about Accoya, how can they trust that it'll be there if they make a commitment to it?
Accoya, it's gaining ground all around the world, and the usage of Accoya is getting greater and greater. And at the moment we have one manufacturing plant, it is in Arnhem in the Netherlands, and we are now building, or we've sold under license, a second plant which will be built in Germany. So the availability of Accoya is becoming greater and greater as the demand for Accoya grows as well.
Okay. So good. So that's helpful. Do we have any questions from our audience?
As a woodworker, are there any special considerations?
Any special what considerations?
Okay.
So the question was, are there any special glue considerations as a woodworker putting this all together?
Accoya, it glues very well with a polyurethane adhesive, and in a non-structural joint, if we're making a window where the jamb goes into a sill, PVA type materials or cascamite or rear formaldehydes, they're also okay, but also resourcing glues work very well as well. So it's a very easy timber to glue, to bond together.
So there's the glue question. What about the finish question? So you don't have exterior grade, you don't have to finish it, you'll get the weathering, the graying. If you don't want the graying and you want to try to hold a consistent color, do you just stain it and put any old finish on, any spar varnish or anything like that?
All coatings are compatible with Accoya. With an opaque, with a solid paint, water-based paints tend to perform better. as they would do on any other type of wood, because they're more permeable, they're more microporous should water get into the wood. With translucent stains, Accoya, it stains very well. It looks like pine, it works like pine, and depending on the colour of stain that goes on, it can bring out the grain and simulate or replicate other types of wood.
How about you? You've been listening in here. Any questions?
What about fire?
Question is simply, what about fire?
Accoya, it has without any fire retardant, it has a US Class C rating. Fire retardants can be put into Accoya and it can achieve Class A. We're now looking at compatible coatings to go onto the top.
Okay. So, how about a bit about the science of Accoya? Can you talk about it on a scientific level, the strength of Accoya, and other things that test metrics?
The process of manufacturing Accoya is called acetylation. We take the wood from New Zealand, and in New Zealand we kiln the wood down to maybe a 15-18% moisture content. We then ship the wood into Holland, where our manufacturing plant is, and we put it into our reactor. We further kiln the wood, maybe down to 3 or 4%, quite a low moisture content, deliberately leaving just a little bit of water in its structure. The chemical that we use, which is acetic acid, we take the water out of it and it becomes known as acetic anhydride. And then we soak the wood in this anhydride. And as a chemical, anhydride, it does not like being without water. It wants to re-react with water. If I spill some anhydride here on the floor, it will draw moisture out of the air. It will start drawing moisture out of our eyes. It wants to re-bond with water. We therefore take this wood, which has a little bit of water in it, and we soak it in the anhydride. And the anhydride draws itself into the wood looking for that water. And then when it hits the water, which we leave within the 3 hydroxyl sites within the wood, it induces 2 reactions. The first reaction is to modify or to change the 3 hydroxyl sites into acetyl groups, which sounds fancy, but it's a clever bit of chemistry. But the point being that gives the woods its new properties of durability and stability. And the second reaction is to dilute, or the anhydride will dilute itself with that water. It goes back to acetic acid and we take it all out.
Okay.
We've then been left with this modified wood.
Okay, so if we want to see the shapes of those chemicals, we could probably look in that brochure also.
We could indeed, yes.
Okay, very good. And the science of wood is interesting, but beyond me, I'm not that geeky. So now, are there how about you, Jared?
Well, drawing on that, so I assume one of your difficulties is nailing that chemical reaction so it stops once it has gone in the middle, hit the moisture, done its chemical reaction. You want it to stop after that and not continually react with exterior moisture, I assume.
Not necessarily. No. When the process has been completed and we know how long the process takes by our experience, we will then dry the wood, and then we will take core samples of every batch of wood that we make to ensure that the process has happened to the correct level. So from a batch of wood, we will take many core samples. Our scientists will analyse each one to prove the process, and then we will disseminate that wood into the market. And the process, just to add on that point, the process is to the core of any piece of wood. It is not a surface treatment, which is what a biocidal system is. It's right to the middle. So we can take a coil of wood, we can cut it, we can split it, we can process it, and we can be assured that we will not expose unmodified wood.
And you can do that to any thickness wood?
To a maximum of 4 inches.
Okay. We have a question from B. Collins in Seattle. How has your product changed the way people view wood, or maybe be able to view what they can do with wood?
I'm a past mill worker, and the only problem with being a mill worker is having to work with wood. It's a problem. You know, wood distorts, it goes rotting, it causes problems, and some mill workers shy away from perhaps wanting to make external products because they can lead to maintenance issues. With Accoya, it takes away that fear, and mill workers are turning back towards Accoya because they know they can make products and be comforted that it will behave itself. So it's enabling more wooden things to be manufactured. But not only windows and doors, but the whole array of external applications. So it takes away the problem associated with traditional wood.
Well, you guys had on the Woodworking Network website walls essentially holding back a pond to do a causeway right through the middle of it.
Yes, we do, and I'm not sure if we have an illustration of it, but it's a bridge. It's in Holland, and we call it the Moses Bridge. It goes through the water, through a reservoir, and the top of the bridge is level with the water level. So as you're walking through, the water's here, and the bridge is going under here. And it's quite marvellous, really. And in the winter, because it's a wet reservoir, and they can regulate the level of the water, in the winter they let it rise, let it freeze over, and then maybe allow ice skating. In the summer, they can drain the reservoir so the water level's here again, pump out the bridge and walk through it. But because it's a coir, it's perfectly okay. It's not degrading and going rotten.
Okay. Yes, and for reference, in Woodworking Network, we've embedded some of the videos from the YouTube channel and the Vimeo channel of Akoya, but you can just go right to their channel and see these things, examples of that Moses Bridge, which is really quite striking to see people walking across it. And then a whiteboard presentation that I think also pops up here every so often that explains the basics on Akoya wood. So definitely something worth having a look at. Any other questions from the live folks?
Does it contribute to lead credits?
So does Akoya attribute to lead credits for
Yes,
the company?
Yes, it does. Akoya will enable several lead credits because of its gold certificate for cradle to cradle and other green attributes that it has. Yes, it does.
All right, so here I'm going to give our cameraman a challenge. I see a bicycle back there. What's that made out of?
It's an Akoya bicycle. We're not bicycle manufacturers, but it's just an end application we thought would be quite fun.
Okay, well, we'll post a picture of that up on Facebook, and then we'll let everyone have a chance to see it. So, any other questions here from the audience?
Do you think Akoya is paving the way for the future of photographs?
So is Akoya opening up just entire new areas that you mentioned? It was woodworkers can now do things that they couldn't prior with wood. Is it opening up whole new areas for the industry?
Yes, it is, and it's also continuing the use of wood in an industry that may be attacked by vinyl or aluminium systems. Homeowners, they have a fear of wood because it's associated with a maintenance issue. It has to be redecorated, it might go rotten, but because Akoya doesn't do any of that, the continuance of wooden products are better, and Akoya just furthers the use of a wood in all sorts of applications, in windows and doors and cladding and decking and so on.
So are you guys as a company pushing the boundaries and ideas of what people can do with this product, or are people coming to you and saying, hey, I had this crazy idea? Maybe he's an artist and he says, I have this crazy idea, will this work? Or
yes, we do. We have an abundance of crazy people out there trying to do crazy things with Akoya, and it is enabling that creativity, and yes, that is the way things are. Yes.
Okay, so some of the things we might see is Akoya wood on exposed surfaces and in areas where we get heavy-duty weather in the United States, where we would say you can't have wood out there, it'll just rot away. But I have started to notice little examples of that. It must be Akoya creeping into the market.
Yes, it is, and it does, and the usage of Akoya in the US is growing. In Europe, it's being around slightly longer, and great volumes of it are out there where it is replacing tropical hardwoods.
Okay. Does Akoya have applications in things like saunas or by a hot tub or things like that?
It's perfect in situations where the humidity is high. Because Akoya is not wanting to swell because of humidity, it works well. And I have examples in Europe where it's being used in spa situations. I have many swimming pool decking projects where Akoya is working very well indeed. And it's not affected by chloride in swimming pools. And yes, it's enabling those projects to remain looking good.
Okay. So those who have joined us just tuned in, it's Bill Essler, Woodworking Network. I'm at the AWF Fair at Access Technologies booth, and we're talking about Akoya wood. With me is Jared Patchen, J. Alexander Fine Woodworking on the far left, and he's fielding questions because I'm going hoarse. And then Mike Lewis, who is our expert from Access Technologies on Akoya wood. If we have, you can submit questions online, and I think Jared's got another one that just popped up.
Well, we have a question from from Massachusetts. Are there any special considerations for fastening? You already mentioned gluing. You just use a regular old nail or screw?
We recommend the use of stainless steel fixings for external applications. As a past manufacturer, I would recommend that anyway, because if we use galvanized fixings, mild steel fixings, whatever the wood species, they can go rusty, they can start corrode. Water is the catalyst that causes corrosion on metal, and then to a degree, any acids in wood, and all wood contains acid, they will accelerate but not induce that corrosion. So we say use stainless steel, but in my opinion, stainless steel is just good millworking practice anyway. Any fasteners within a building where we haven't got any moisture, then it's not so important. We can use mild steel, we can use galvanized fixings. So in summary, anything wet outside, we say use stainless steel, which I would say anyway. Anything within a building where there isn't moisture, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so.
Well, I saw in the video behind you, wood siding, I'm assuming, lap siding out of Akoya. Are you guys the mill that supplies it to a manufacturer who would run it through molders and make the final pieces, or are you guys actually the suppliers of siding and different end products?
No, we are the manufacturers of the product. We are the company that's manufacturing and acetylating the wood. We then sell the wood through our distribution network as raw lumber, where it can then get processed into cladding and decking and sold on to mill workers to be made into windows and doors.
Now, here at AWFS, we're seeing a number of introductions and kind of inventive new forms of fasteners for joinery, and like from Lamello and other places. How does Akoya work with those mechanical fasteners?
It works well with mechanical fasteners, and provided those mechanical fasteners are made well, and if they are mild steel and they're coated well, then Akoya, it works like regular wood. We need to treat Akoya with the respect that we might treat oak, because it's got a similar acidity to oak, but it works well.
Similar to oak, did you say?
It's similar to oak in its acidity.
Okay.
We have slightly increased the acidity of the wood, albeit by less than 1%, and therefore it's similar to oak or western red cedar. So if we use the same sort of fixings that we would use on those wood products, then Akoya is fine.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the window behind Bill, we've always been talking about doors and window manufacturers, how it's almost a dream product because they can guarantee the window's going to work in every season. Does it do anything to the manufacturing costs for an end user? Could I now afford a wood window, whereas prior it was too expensive? Because the manufacturer can guarantee the window's going to work, so they don't have to worry about warranty issues as much?
Well, you raise a very good point. Firstly, the manufacture of a window made from Akoya is about the same cost as manufacturing that window from Sapili, although Sapili is more expensive, although Akoya is more expensive than Sapili. We have process cost savings by using Akoya, as I explained earlier. There's less ripping time, there's less waste because it's dimension stock. It doesn't rag or rip on machines, so there's less sanding time. It coats better, so there's less process time in applying the coatings. So for no more money, you could have an Akoya window or an Akoya door that's about the same cost as Sapili. But the added benefits being, firstly, as a manufacturer, if you were to make it, you have the comfort that the product will behave itself when it's outside. It won't warp, it won't distort, you won't have to go back to do because it's gone wrong, so your service calls or your maintenance requests are greatly reduced. So for no more money, you're getting the added benefit of having a product that performs better. Coatings last longer, as we have spoken about earlier, so you wouldn't have the phone call that my coating's falling off my window. So it designs that away. Akoya designs and engineers out potential maintenance issues. So for no more money, you get a lot more benefit.
Do we have any other questions popping up online?
Oh yes, here we go. Kathy Fink from AWFS, right here. are there any negatives or limitations when using Akoya wood rather than? Are there any drawbacks to using Akoya versus the usual suspects out there, Ipe or teak?
Drawbacks, that's a very short list, really. We say if using an opaque system, we say use an anti-stain blocking primer just to prevent any tannins and extractives coming through the wood and staying in the surface. Other drawbacks, we've spoke about the use of stainless steel fixings externally, but that's what we should be doing anyway. Now I'm struggling to find any more.
So if you're looking at using beech or rolling out beech, and I know beech usually comes from Germany, correct, or Europe, so it's a lot closer to your manufacturing facility than New Zealand. So is that going to make it even more of a green product for you guys to be able to offer to the market?
The fact that Akoya comes from New Zealand does not affect its green credentials. It could be argued that we're transporting wood halfway around the world, but when companies like Cradle to Cradle look at the environmental impact or embodied energy of materials, they look at the whole process. They look at the growing tree, the absorption or sequestration of carbon. They will also look at transporting the material from Australasia to Europe. They look at our process, the heat generated in our plants, and then disseminating wood around the world. These institutions will argue that to transport a cubic metre or cubic yard of a material from Australasia to Europe uses less diesel than to transport the same cubic yard of material, say from New York to Washington on the back of a truck. So the actual transportation is very insignificant. More carbon is generated in our process, the heating our factory. There's a recent study done in Europe whereby a renowned institute, they looked at the embodied energy of a whole window and they gave it over its life a carbon negative rating. So transportation and shipping material is insignificant.
Very interesting, and I suppose the fact that the wood is more stable and lasts longer, it's sequestering carbon for a longer time.
Of course, we're trapping carbon into this finished product, and the more Akoya that is made, it will be argued, the more greenhouse gas or carbon we are taking out of the atmosphere.
Okay. Now we've had a few new people come join us in the audience here, so if there's some questions that they'd like to ask the expert, would you like to ask a question?
How will this wood stand up in the tropical climate in the Caribbean?
So the question is, how does it stand up in the Caribbean?
Akoya is completely unaffected by high humidity. It will not take water into its structure, so therefore it will not expand, it will not swell, it will stay completely stable. Akoya is also unaffected by high heat. That will also not cause it to distort.
What about termites and wood-borne insects in the Caribbean?
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about, well, you did mention insects, so the question is, what about insects in the Caribbean?
In the Caribbean.
Akoya,
What different types of wood-borne insects?
Akoya does very well in termite resistance tests. In fact, we had a test at Louisiana State University whereby Akoya was proven to be termite resistant. In fact, actually, in a termite test, when Akoya is the only food source available to the termites, and when they realise there is nothing to eat within the wood because we've modified the nutritional value within it, the termites turn to cannibalism. They all start eating each other. It's because they can get no food from Akoya, so they eat their friends. It's not.
Okay. Well, that's a well-deserved fate.
How many years will be termite resistant?
We say above ground there's a 50-year rot resistance.
Even if the property is not fumigated and treated against termites, still would be attacking doors and windows?
It outperforms tropical woods all around the world. We have ongoing tests in the Far East, in the Northwest Territories of Australia. It's resistant against the Australian white ant, the Formosan beetle. It is doing very, very well in termite resistant tests.
But this wood is that same wood that is symbols there? That is
Want to repeat, maybe repeat
Yeah,
that question?
So the question from the audience is just asking about the two woods. This is Akoya and this is a normal pine. So they're just showing the normal pine, how it reacts with the water.
This one, which one is
Yes, and so you can answer that. So the gentleman's asking, what is Akoya? The material.
Akoya is a radiata pine, which we source from New Zealand, which is a very fast-growing timber. And then, as chemical engineers, we then modify the wood. We alter its structure, we change it at its molecular level. And then following this molecular change, the wood takes on the new properties of stability, being the most stable wood that there is, and it also becomes the most rock-resistant wood that there is.
And is there written guarantees that it would be with your guarantees? Like
Yeah, we haven't even asked about guarantees for all this.
Yes, of course, there is a 50-year guarantee against the wood going rotting or degrading above ground, and a 25-year guarantee if it's in the ground.
Okay, so we've had a few more people join us here live at the show, and of course we're with Mike Lewis from Access Systems talking about Akoya wood, especially treated wood, and Jared Patchen on the far left or right, depending on which side of the screen you're on, from J. Alexander Fine Woodworking in Boise. And we're posing some questions to Mike. We've talked about the machining properties of Akoya wood, how adhesives behave on Akoya wood, cabinetry, outdoor furniture, exterior applications. But if you just came in a little later, maybe you have a question about Akoya. Some questions? Okay.
For barbecue cabinets, exterior, for the doors, the cabinetry, the exterior for the barbecue area.
Sure.
Is good for the
Okay.
doors?
Yeah.
Cabinet doors?
So you want Jared will repeat your question because we have an online audience too, and then Mike will answer.
Yeah, so the question once again touched on outdoor kitchens. Many of us, obviously the cabinet makers here, deal with a lot of outdoor kitchens. They're becoming very popular here, at least in the States.
And outdoor doors.
Oh, and outdoor cabinet doors.
For barbecue areas.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect for outdoor cabinetry because of the stability of the product. It's not affected by humidity, by water, by heat. It remains straight, it doesn't distort. So therefore, if you were to make external cabinetry from Akoya, you have the comfort that it will remain looking pristine and behaving itself.
For the expansion, contraction, for the caps to stay consistent.
Akoya is not quite, but it's almost inert. So we can have tight tolerances, we don't have to make considerations for seasonal changes in traditional timber. It is the most stable of woods.
So as long as you're using a exterior grade glue, you're going to be just fine.
Yes, of course. I would suggest the use of maybe polyurethane glues, and your cabinetry will remain looking good for years.
What about you?
Is it compatible or comparable to like ePay?
So yeah, so the question is comparing Akoya to Ipe and teak and all the other kind of usual suspects.
With regard to durability or stability? With regard to its durability, in Europe we have the durability classes of timber. In class 1 we have the most dense tropical hardwoods. In class 1 we would have Ipe, we would also have teak or purple heart, green heart, spotted gum, ironbark. Akoya's in there as well. And in class 2 we have lesser timbers, Iroko, oak and western red cedar and so on. But we have a renowned wood institute in the UK known as TRADA, the Timber Research and Development Association, and they quite openly say if there is a durability class as class 1 plus, or very, very durable, that's where Akoya needs to be positioned.
Like on decking applications, we use treated lumber, the old lumberized the laminates, the natural laminates in the yellow pine, which is the base material, delaminate, you put traffic splinters. Is this more stable?
Yeah, so the question for the video audience is decking material, moisture, you have delamination, especially for pine, has the really large cathedral grains. Last thing you want to do is run around there, have a kid running around there and just slide a sliver halfway up their foot.
Akoya is used in many decking applications around the world, in the Far East, in India, in Scandinavia, here in the US, in Europe, and I know of no instances where that has become a problem.
And we do have a question piggybacking off that. How does it do one of the other decking materials, Trex, recycled milk jugs. I have heard that in the heat, it can buckle and start to warp, and then it's incredibly hot on your feet, so you're not going to hang out on your deck in the middle of summer. How does this Akoya act like normal wood? So I assume it absorbs some warmth, but doesn't get overly hot?
No, it is just like traditional timber. It is as easy to walk on as any other type of wood. Essentially, it is wood, except we've just changed it at its molecular level.
Now, we're of course inviting questions from our online audience and the folks here, but I got a question for you. Has anyone used Akoya? Okay, so you want to tell us a bit about what you did?
You want to bring him up here?
Come on up. Come on up, Randy. This is Randy Porter. He's going to tell us about his Akoya project.
Good. I had to put gates in on my house, both sides of the house, and I had no question about it. I went straight with Akoya because it's exposed all the time to the weather, gets a lot of use and abuse, and I thought it would be the perfect item for. We get very hot summers, a lot of sun beats on the wood, rain falls directly on it. Perfect application. I used actually a darker color, so for all those reasons, it was a perfect application.
How did you first hear about Akoya?
Well, many years ago, and I actually sell Akoya.
All right. Well, there's a testimony.
What about price?
Okay.
Yeah. How does the price compare? You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, to buy a board of Akoya is very similar to buying a board of genuine mahogany. As mahogany, yes. But of course, by manufacturing something from Akoya as opposed to mahogany, there will be process savings. Akoya is dimension stock, so you pretty much buy the size of board that you want. So therefore, there's going to be less waste and less process time.
Now, for those who have joined us more recently, we did talk about a version of MDF that is made of Akoya wood, so you can use that as a panel product, and other ways of putting Akoya together with solid, joining Akoya wood to non-Akoya wood in restoration projects. So there's a lot of variety in the applications for it. Are there any other questions from some of our newcomers? Anybody imagining something they might do with Akoya? Or a question about, is it possible? How about you, Thomas? Any question? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, good. This has been really kind of an awesome get-together here. Something new for us. So, Bill Essler, thanking everyone for participating on Access Technologies, learning about Akoya wood here at the AWF Fair. My thanks to Mike Lewis, Access Technologies, Akoya specialist and expert, and Jared Patchen, J. Alexander Fine Woodworking, a joiner like you who's learning about Akoya right along with you. Thanks everybody for joining us.